Okay, so now we have our bird app, and it's time to replace this default image with an image that we'll get from the internet. So the first thing that we're going to need to do in order to put anything inside of this image view is to hook it up to our cell, just like we would do any view. So let's go ahead and open our main.storyboard, and then let's also open our bird cell. Okay, Option Enter opens that on the right while I have the storyboard open on the left like this. I'm going to click on my image view in the document outline, and I'm going to control drag it over to my cell. Let's call this bird image view. Good. Now we have our image view hooked up, and we can tell that from our filled in bubble. But we don't have any way for a bird to hold a reference to an image that we would display on its cell. So let's change that next. We'll go to our bird class, which currently has 3 attributes: the name, the description, and the confirmed sighting. We'll add another attribute called imageUrl that has a type of string. When we do this, we'll get an error in our initializer. This says return from initializer without initializing all stored properties. It's saying, hey, you have this imageUrl property. It's not an optional. It doesn't have a default. And yet, we don't have a way to pass it in the initializer. So you're requiring the presence of an attribute that we're not providing yet. We can fix that by adding the imageUrl to our initializer like so, and by setting the imageUrl on our class from that initializer, like this. So this looks good. Now, inside of our BirdService, we initialize all these birds, but that initializer isn't going to be valid at this point because we need an imageUrl in the initializer. Let's get rid of some of these birds, and let's add an imageUrl to these 2. Back over here on the internet, I've gone ahead and I've selected a bird for you. Let's get a hold of this bird's image. So we have this URL up here that I've copied, and I'm going to paste it in like so. For this example, I'm going to go ahead and use the same bird image for all of them. So let's do imageUrl. But of course, this could be different bird images for each bird. Great. So now I still want to have a lot of birds visible in my list view. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this and come down. How many do you think we need? Let's go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Let's do one more. Great. Awesome. So now we have these birds, and they have their imageUrls. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw from that imageUrl to get the data onto the screen. Let's go into our bird cell. So currently, we set all of the attributes on the bird cell inside of this didSet block. We'll go ahead and do that for our image view as well. Now to do that, we are going to use something called a dispatch queue. I'm going to show you that here in this video, and then in the next video, we'll talk a little bit more about dispatch queues and what they're for. So I'm going to say dispatch queue dot global, pass in a quality of service, and I'm going to choose user initiated. I'm going to say async. Great. And I'm going to say here bird let bird image data equal ns data, and then it should autocomplete for me. For this one, it's not base 64 encoded. For this, we're using a URL. So let's do contents of, and we're going to pass our string into a URL initializer. So there should be one called string. There we go. And we're going to use self.bird.imageURL. Great. So now we've got a hold of our data. We're currently on the global dispatch queue. We're now going to switch to the dispatch queue.main. Also call async and say self.bird.imageView.image equals UIImage. And we should get some options. Data, bird image data. Great. So let's take a look at some of our errors. Value of optional type string. For now, we're going to go ahead and force unwrap our image URL because it's possible that we pass in a string that can't be turned into a URL. We'll talk about how to handle that a little more robustly later. We're also going to go ahead and force unwrap that whole string. Once again, we'll look at more robust methods later. All right, and finally, we need to force downcast this. Good, good, good. And it says forced cast from NS data to data only unwraps and bridges. That's fine for now. Good, good, good. So once again, we're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening with these dispatch queues. But what we've done is we've taken our image URL and we have cast that from a string into a URL object, which we passed into NS data, which then takes the contents of that URL and turns them into data for us. Finally, we've passed that data into a UI image initializer, which is going to give us an image to set on our bird image view. So let's give that a run and see how it does. Nice. So as all of our birds get set, this image appears for each of our cells. Now there's one more quick thing that I want to show you here that has to do with the way that views are customarily laid out according to the Human Interface Guidelines of iOS, known as the HIG. The iOS Style Guide right now advocates for a lot of roundedness in iOS UIs, and it's customary, as of some of the more recent iOS versions, for images like this one to often appear in a rounded form. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these images circles. The image views will be circles, and our image itself will appear as a little bit of an oval because right now it's scaled to fit and it's not a square image. But you'll be able to see that roundedness anyway. So let's do self.bird.imageView. And what we're going to do is we're going to access a property that appears on all views called the layer. The layer allows us to change things like the shape, background color, shadow, and other attributes of a given view. We're going to change its corner radius. This is an attribute that manages the roundness of the corners. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to set that corner radius to half of the width of the image view, which I can do with self.bird.imageView. I want to access the frame in which it appears. I want to get the width of that frame. And I want to divide that width by 2. That's going to set my corner radius to half of what my width is. And then when I run my code again, you can see that there's a circle here that looks a little cut off on our image because our image is not a square. But this image view now appears as a circle and then fits our bird image inside of it.